So, our minds, our attitudes and aspirations must be totally dedicated to work towards awakening. I mean, of course these texts are all intended, for monks and hermits. But nonetheless, I don't think that we should lessen. I don't think we need to dilute the Dharma. Because even though traditionally there's a lot of talk about, how many, practices you do, how many, hours, days, weeks, months of strict retreat you do, at the end of the day, the question is, are we inwardly transforming? And many people who do weeks and months of meditation, they come out and the whole thing collapses. So it doesn't necessarily mean that is going to be of genuine benefit. The benefit comes from recognizing that everything we do and everyone we meet either we are open and aware or we are not. And wherever we are, whether we're in retreat or whether we're in the marketplace, in the middle of a mall, doesn't matter. The question is our mind. What is the mind doing in this moment? How aware are we? So I don't think we have to dilute the genuine Dharma. Yes, we cannot do the millions and millions of mantra recitations and, all the complicated practices which in Tibet they had infinite amount of time to do. And that suited that environment and that culture. We're in a different environment and a different culture. But the Dharma itself is still totally relevant because it has to do with how to work skillfully with the mind. And again, I must emphasize when we say mind, it doesn't just mean the brain. The word mind in Sanskrit, chitta, it has the idea of heart-mind. So a lot of what is going on in a deeper level is much more here at the heart chakra than purely intellectually operating from the brain center. I mean, a much deeper level of our awareness happens in a very different location from the brain. The brain is the machine, but it's not the energy driving the machine. So anyway, so this first part is about understanding that we need to put the Dharma at the center of our lives. And not just, on high days or holidays, but on all the time, every time, as much as possible, to bring us into mindfulness and awareness, but with an open, kind heart, recognizing that all beings want to be happy, and that, just as I would rather people are nice to me than not nice, everybody would rather people were nice than not nice. And so, to each being is very precious to themselves, so therefore we should try to be as kind as possible to all beings. So to keep the mind open and at the same time present, that alone is an incredibly profound Dharma practice. And if we can try to do that, then that is taking the mind towards the Dharma. So then the second says, Chulam Sudrova Chinchiluktasul. So that is translated as, do we have that? Grant your blessings that Dharma may go along the path, or make your Dharma practice become the path, or that Dharma leads to the path. Right. So actually in the Tibetan it says chur. Chur is Dharma. Lam Tudrowa means go on the path. Right? Chinchilaptaso means please bless me that. So, first you're asking that your mind should go towards the Dharma. Then making sure that the Dharma itself is on the path. Because, again, we can do Dharma practices, as I'm saying. We can do, so many, outwardly doing so many Dharma practices. Like doing circumambulations and prostrations and pilgrimage and 10 million mantras and going to visit all the big lamas or all the great teachers. But it might not actually, so that Dharma itself might not be going on the path. It might not actually be improving us. That's what it means. Just because we do outwardly, look, I've done all the pilgrimages, I've done 20 mudras, I've done this, I've done that, I've done the other. Then? So we have to be very careful that our Dharma practice is actually moving us on the path. And that there actually is working for us. That there actually is some inner transformation going on. Because otherwise it's very easy to get caught up in all these outer manifestations and looks like very good. Wow, fantastic. How many retreats we've done, how many this, how many that. But maybe inside, nothing really is changing. We're just getting, more and more credits, but it's not moving anything. So, therefore, it's very important that not only our mind goes towards the Dharma, but the Dharma itself goes on the path. That the Dharma itself really is leading somewhere. All our practice. Is it getting us anywhere? So, the traditional way of dealing with this is, first of all, dealing with our motivation. Why are we practicing? Well, most people would say they're practicing in order to make themselves feel better. I mean, to be honest. In the Tibetan tradition, they have 3 spheres of motivation for Dharma, for spiritual practice in general. And the first is, as I say, in order that we can make ourselves, this life, feel, of benefit for this life. We do virtuous things because we hope it's going to make us good karma. And we practice mindfulness or do retreats because we hope it's going to get our mind a little bit in better, conditions, so we'll feel better and life will be easier. And in general, our aim is to make this life just happier to live with. And so that is considered to be, none of these motivations are bad. But each one of them has a larger and larger scope. So the first motivation is basically so that I'll feel better. My mind's a bit of a mess and I can see that, the main problem is me. So I'm going to do something with my mind to make it so that I can then feel, life will feel better for me. And so also people who are practicing, not just in Buddhism, but in any spiritual Dharma, in order to, gain merit points for this life and maybe next life go to heaven and, have a bit of a rest. All of that is based on trying to make samsara more comfortable. And so, for many people, their aim is basically to make samsara comfortable. But unfortunately, samsara, by its very nature, is uncomfortable. Samsara, by its very nature, is unsatisfactory. It's dukkha. So we can have patches when it goes okay. The Buddha never said life is suffering. he said that the unrealized life is suffering. In other words, if we don't understand life, then we suffer. But life in itself couldn't be any way. I mean, a Buddha is also living, but he's not suffering. So it's not just that life is suffering, it's the fact that life full of negative emotions and run by the ego is suffering. So that as long as we haven't understood how things really are, we are going to suffer. I mean, it doesn't mean that you're suffering the whole time. Suffering, it can be very, very subtle. But because of impermanence and death, it's never, ever anything is going to be entirely satisfactory. It just isn't. That's just the way things are. So, the desire to practice a spiritual path in order to make our life right now more comfortable, and for the future life, if there is one, then to also make that more comfortable, is the first sphere of aspiration, why people practice. They hope they're going to make lots and lots of good karma so that in this lifetime, or at least in the next lifetime, things will get better. But because samsara, by its very nature, is unsatisfactory and indeterminate and impermanent, it doesn't really work. So then the next level of aspiration is, in this lifetime, okay, I came back as a human being and I'm in pretty good circumstances. I live in a nice country and, I went to school and my parents were okay. And, life is okay, but, what? But next lifetime, who knows? Next lifetime, who knows where we're going to be? If we're even going to be humans, who knows what we're going to be? It's very, very insecure. And even now, at the moment, okay, I'm all right, I have enough to eat, I have somewhere to live, I'm fairly healthy. Tomorrow, who knows? We don't know what's going to happen. People get sick. We all get old if we don't die beforehand. And then we die. And we don't know. So, therefore, the next level of aspiration is, get me out. Please understand, in the Buddhism, traditionally, the samsara in Tibetan is called korwa, which means a circle. And many of you have seen these photos of the Wheel of Life. And the idea is that we're endlessly going around getting reborn, redying, reborn, redying, endlessly. Up, down, this way, that way. And it's a cycle. It just keeps going. There's no beginning, no end. Unless we ourselves break the wheel. Now what's keeping the cycle going? Just a minute. I just want to make sure that this is what we're supposed to be talking about right now. Yeah. But anyway, I'll mention. And next one deals with this in more detail. What is keeping it going is our ego. The belief that there is someone who is creating the karma and receiving the fruits of their karma. I have this equipment on, so I can't do it. I'll do it with this. Okay. So, consider a mala. If you've got a bigger mala, you're doing better. Okay, so each one of these beads is a karma, an action. The Buddha said that karma is intention. So all intended actions of body, speech, and mind create seeds in our subconscious, our alive jnana, which eventually will come up when the causes and conditions are ready. So each one is this is a seed, right? So then there's one, and then it pulls the next one, which pulls the next one, which pulls the next one, which pulls the next one, endlessly. And because it's round, it just keeps going round and round and round and round and round, round, round. There's no end. There's no beginning and no end to a mala. So, what is keeping all these beads connected so that this bead will then lead to this bead, will lead to that bead, is the string. Cut the string, that's it. You pull this bead, but none of the other beads will follow. So the string connecting our karmas is the belief in an actor. As long as we believe, I did this, we will receive the results in this lifetime and future lifetimes. Cut the string, that's it. So therefore, in all Buddha's teachings, in all the schools, the aim is to recognize our false identification with the self. We'll deal with this more in the next one. But so therefore what are the so-called Shravakayana schools are dealing with getting beyond samsara, and the way to go beyond samsara is to realize selflessness. As I say, we'll deal with this more later. But selflessness, therefore, breaks the wheel. And samsara transforms naturally into nirvana. Samsara and nirvana are not places, they're states of mind. An unawakened state of mind projects samsara. An awakened state of mind realizes nirvana. But then comes the thought, yes, but if I go beyond samsara and realize nirvana and do not need to be reborn again, nonetheless, what about everyone else? The traditional example is of a burning house. That if your house is on fire and all your family are in the house and your pet, could you just leave that house and say, well, so sorry you're burning, at least I'm out? No. You would do everything you could to also bring out all your parents and your children and your partners and your dog or your cat in Badrigar. You couldn't just walk away. Another example is if one is in a swamp, a very thick, deep swamp, and one's drowning in the swamp, and then through making great efforts, one gets onto dry land. Then, again, could one just turn around and see all one's families and friends and all the beings drowning, and then just say, well, sorry folks, you're drowning, but I got out, look, I'm on dry ground, so if you make lots of effort, you also could get on dry ground, just keep going, bye. Couldn't be. The fact that one is on dry ground would be reason for holding out a hand or a rope to pull all the others out of the swamp. So that sense of our responsibility towards others and our interconnection with all others gave rise to what is called the Mahayana school. And that is what is called bodhicitta, which means bodhi means awakening or enlightenment, citta means mind, heart. The aspiration for enlightenment, not just for the sake of one's own benefits, but in order to then be in a position to bring out all other beings to safety. It's like if you're going to, you plan to be a doctor. Well, very few people go through medical school and years and years and years of studies just in order that if they themselves get sick, they'll be able to diagnose themselves. I mean, they do all that study in order to be of benefit to others. They use their knowledge in order that they can then be effectively helpful towards others. Because if we ourselves are medically untrained, even with the best motivations, we just won't know how to help others. And if we try, then we are likely to misdiagnose and give them all the wrong medicines and create more problems because we ourselves are based in ignorance. So therefore we need to acquire the skills needed in order to genuinely be able to benefit others. So this aspiration to do our practice in order that in time we could be of benefit for others is called bodhicitta. The vow is to attain enlightenment for the sake of all beings. And so this is actually a huge vow because it doesn't just mean now, it means endlessly, for as long as samsara exists. So long will I be here for the sake of benefiting all beings. So in that way, one has renounced just settling into nirvana, whatever that may be, in order to come back again and again and again, in order to acquire more and more wisdom, and with it the ability to benefit more and more beings. So this is a way to make the Dharma go on the path. That our aspiration, right from the start, our GPS, is set. Enlightenment for the sake of all beings. Then what happens along the path? We can know that nonetheless we're heading towards enlightenment because the GPS is set there. So even though we might do a few detours, eventually everything that we are doing is intended for the sake of not only our own awakening, but our own awakening in order to wake up others. That's the whole point. That's our responsibility. So when we practice also, for example, in the Tibetan tradition, they have these preliminary practices, and the first one is 100,000 full-length prostrations. And you visualize what is called a refuge tree. It's very complicated, of course, because it's Tibetan. But on the plain, you imagine you're on a huge meadow, and as one is prostrating, all other beings are prostrating along with one. And that doesn't just mean human beings, but also animals, insects, fish, birds, gods, spirits, everything. Everybody's prostrating. And so, you can, if you get bored with prostrating, you can visualize, like centipedes trying to decide which legs to put together as they go down. And fish going flop, 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 flop. And it can be quite entertaining. But anyway, the idea is to recognize that we are the representatives in our practice for all beings. It's like if you go, every country has representatives in the United Nations. You don't send the whole country to the United Nations. They have representatives, or like an ambassador. They represent the whole country. So we are the ambassador. We are doing this on behalf of all these sentient beings who don't have the time or inclination. We are their representatives. Therefore, we must represent them as well as we can, because they rely on us to do this for them. And at the end, we dedicate again all the merit or the virtuous karma towards all sentient beings. So wherever we're doing, whatever practices we're doing, we should try to think that we are doing this not just for the sake of ourselves, but for the sake of all beings. And not be so lazy. It doesn't matter. I've made this commitment to attain enlightenment for the sake of all beings. So I have to fulfill my commitment. I promised all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and all beings that I would really strive to use my life for the sake of Dharma. So therefore, I can't let them down. This is my commitment. So the Bodhisattva vow is very, people take it just, as something you do. But actually, it's very profound because it's not just for this lifetime, but for all future lifetimes. And this is why those of you who are practicing in this path and have taken the Bodhisattva vow, to do it again and again as much as often as possible. Not only every day to recite it, but if, good teachers come, to take it again and again in order to plant very deep seeds in our mind stream. So next lifetime, again, we come back into circumstances where we can quickly meet with the Dharma again and not waste time. So all these things need to be repeated again and again and again and again until it becomes just natural for us. How are we doing here? Okay, so along with that, so now we have to think, okay, we have to bring our mind, now we are bringing the Dharma onto the path. So the Dharma isn't something out there, it's not something in the book. The Dharma is our mind, the state of our mind. So we need to get to work on our mind. It's not enough just to outwardly manifest Dharma activity. The important thing is to transform our heart. And so therefore the first step after we have taken refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, and we have taken the vow to really to strive to attain enlightenment in order for the benefit of all beings, to liberate all beings. It's like if you're in prison and then we get a key and we open the door to... We have to let all the prisoners come out. We can't just go out and slam the door and say, okay, boys, you can manage for yourself. If we have an escape route, we have to help all beings to escape. So, how? Well, the way to gain liberation is through transforming the heart. I say that there's like the 4 T's. You tame the mind, train the mind, transform the mind, and eventually transcend the mind. So we start from where we are, which is taming. The Buddha said, this is 2,500 years ago, the Buddha said, we all have mad monkey minds. What he would say today, I do not know. That was then. So we have mad monkey minds. Anybody who has sat down to meditate knows that, right? We think it all looks so easy. You just sit there, breathing in, breathing out, and then it starts by the third breath. Oh, yes, what am I doing? Well, I wonder what we're having for lunch. So the first thing is to tame the mad monkey. And so the Buddha, in general, when it came to meditation, has 2 aspects, which are in Sanskrit called shamatha and vipassana. Shamatha, which means to calm, to make smooth, is the practice to get our minds one-pointed and more quiet. And so there are various methods to do this. But throughout the Buddhist world, in general, the beginning is by focusing on the breath. The breath is a very useful object for us to rest the mind on, because first of all, we're always breathing. And secondly, we cannot breathe in the past or in the future. We can only breathe now. So if our minds are settled on the breath, the ingoing and outgoing breath, we're present. And an added thing is that the sense of ego, the sense of I, actually cannot live in the present. If you think about it, most of our thoughts are concerned with the past or the future, or if they're in the present, it's judging it, comparing it, thinking about it, not knowing it. If we are in a state of simplicity, just present with the ingoing, outgoing breath, at that point there is no comments, and so there's no ego. So this is a very profound way, even though it's very simple, to bring the mind into the present moment, which is actually all we have. Because the past is gone, the future hasn't come. The only time we have is right in this moment. And that also is like a river, it's flowing. It's not standing there waiting for us to recognize it. But the way to connect with it is through just resting the mind on the breath. We don't have to make it tight. Go for the good breath. Breathing in, breathing out. Yeah, relax. Breathe and know we are breathing. That's all. Because what we are trying to do in shamatha, we can have shamatha on any object. When I first started, I was given a pebble, a little stone, and told to focus on that. We can focus on anything. Sometimes they like to focus on the Buddha image. Sometimes in the Theravadan school they have what are called kasinas, earth kasinas, sky kasinas, and so forth. I mean, it doesn't really matter. The important thing is not the object. The important thing is the awareness, the knowing quality. That's what we're trying to develop. So don't get obsessed with the object. The object is just a hook to keep the mind present, to keep the mind aware. But the important thing is the awareness, not the object. So, for example, if one is sitting with the breath and then there is some really obstructive noise outside, people talking, dogs barking, kookaburras laughing or whatever, instead of seeing that as an obstruction, as an obstacle, one can just be aware of sound. Not as much as possible naming it, and certainly not trying to judge it. Do I like it? Don't I like it? Oh, why don't they shut up? Just knowing it. Then that is also a very profound meditation. Not good, not bad, just what it is. And again, it's the awareness. The awareness is what we're trying to do. This mindfulness, this is what we're trying to cultivate. The knowing quality, without comment or judgment. Just their awareness. Naked. Naked because we're not dressing it up in all our ideas and concepts and judgments and comparisons. And, every time we see something, we immediately compare it and judge it and so forth. No. Just knowing it as it is without all our mental comment. And meantime, the mind is going blah, 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 blah. No problem. We are not trying to stop thought. Thought is not the problem. We'll deal with that again next time. Thought is not the problem. It's our identification with the thought is the problem. So, as our awareness becomes clearer, then we can, and we have that sense of awareness as a level, a more subtle level of our consciousness than the surface consciousness of our mental chatter. As we begin to feel that sense of just presence, then we can turn it back onto the mind itself. And the fact that we can do that, that consciousness can watch mind, the mental chatter, shows that it's not the same level, it's a different level. And so this again is why it's so important not to get obsessed with the object. The Buddha taught 4 objects of mindfulness. First of all, the body,